one of the ways we hope to achieve that higher level of legitimacy is, again, through blockchain technology. One of the cases that we covered at the Blockchain Research Institute was a blockchain-based application and 2 pilot projects that were used. The application's called Votum, and 2 pilot projects were conducted by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, based in Cleveland, Ohio, and the National Radio Hall of Fame in Chicago, Illinois. You may have heard that in 2016, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame had a terribly embarrassing hack, whereby the fan favorite band, like the band of the year, was Chicago, and Chicago was around in the late 70s. So it was terribly embarrassing that the inductee for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame came out to be Chicago with 82 million votes, which was totally impossible and terribly embarrassing. And it forced the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to think differently about its next election and how they were going to conduct that. So they worked with Votum, a blockchain-based voting application, to conduct the 2017 election, which was incredibly successful. Lots of issues still to work out. Same thing with National Radio Hall of Fame. They used text messaging to conduct their various elections, and they were subject to a number of inefficiencies, frustrations, and so on. So both of the experience of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and National Radio Hall of Fame were really positive, not perfect, but indicative of what can be achieved and how much work we have to still do to get there. Imagine this application being rolled out to conduct governmental elections. I believe it's on its way. Oh, did it really? Wow. Wow, okay, so it's coming. Like, that train's left the station now. So now it's a matter of implementation and testing out region by region and bringing people out knowing that they can cast a secure ballot. Exciting. Social media. So in the wake of Facebook and leaking the data of 87 million users to the Trump-affiliated Cambridge Analytica. Yes, if we use a service like Facebook for free, we are the product, but we also don't necessarily agree to Facebook knowing that they're collecting data about deeply personal things that we do, not just on Facebook, but after we leave Facebook. The cookies and the software that Facebook is using to follow us on our digital journey once we leave the Facebook application, even if we log out, Facebook knows the next website we went to and how long we stayed there. And I think now the public is finally waking up to saying, wow, these free tools like Google and Facebook, they know an awful lot about us. And is there a better way to communicate online with our peers? So blockchain innovators behind the Akasha project have built out a decentralized blockchain-based social media network that will allow, for the very first time, a platform that is censorship resistant, that is not reinforcing our own versions of the truth, that is giving us the content that we select and not the content that the network believes that we want through an algorithm. Facebook serves up the content that it thinks we want, that it believes that we want. Akasha also deals with the fact that there are bots, and bot traffic has really messed up digital advertising. So if we can solve some of the problems that are inherent with digital marketing, bot traffic and user engagement, pre-roll ads that are ineffective, we can create a new mechanism whereby the brand can interact directly with the consumer on a blockchain and bypass that intermediary, bypass Facebook in the process. If I, as an Akasha user, can voluntarily share my data with an organization, say, yeah, sure, I will speak to you, I will watch your ad, and you can send me a micropayment in cryptocurrency for my attention. And the organization will know that it really did reach a human being who has given meaningful feedback. And that is a new kind of economy. That's where I'm able to monetize the value that I create on a network. So that's an exciting opportunity for raising new levels of truth on digital platforms, being able to source journalistic content that's verified by the community, not verified by algorithms. And finally, blockchain transformations for business. What does it mean? Which enterprise problems is the technology currently solving? So one of the great examples of an early adopter of blockchain is an aerospace, an aircraft manufacturer called Moog that's based out of East Aurora, New York. And Moog has been around since the 1950s, and it produces machined metallic precision parts used in hydraulics and steering systems. And what it saw coming down the pipeline due to technological advancement was that 3D printing was an increasing threat on its manufacturing business model. And so what it did was it purchased a 3D printing company, and as 3D printing became a superior way to produce or to produce precision parts, exceeding the capabilities of machines, it realized that disruption in its business model was going to be substantial. And how it applied blockchain technology in the process was that Moog decided that to manufacture those precision parts, this could be done by deploying 3D printers to the point of assembly, to their clients' assemblies, where the parts were actually needed. And instead of shipping goods and services along the supply chain and having transportation costs, it simply shipped a certified, blockchain-based, validated, registered, secure, computer-aided design of that precision part. And so the parts are printed at the point they're needed. You don't have the transportation costs, and the whole provenance of that part and its life cycle is embedded onto a blockchain, and it creates a permanent record of parts provenance. This is extremely relevant. Another one of Moog's business lines is in healthcare. Johnson & Johnson, J&J, had to recall 20,000 hips a few years ago because it was unable to source which hips were problematic, and it involved surgery for people who had had the hip installed. So the ability to be able to trace parts, to solve problems related to recalls is incredibly powerful, and Moog realized this very quickly. So it's applied this combination of 3D printing with blockchain certifications. Fraud is a very big problem with manufacturing of parts. Moog's client is the U.S. Department of Defense. They build military aircraft. They have, big airline manufacturers as customers as well. And incredibly, 15% of all parts are in the supply chain are fraudulent, and that's a big problem if you're producing military aircraft. You want to make sure that the parts are always certified. Highly regulated industries want and expect this level of certification. So blockchain as a platform for the truth, for that permanent record, that immutable record of the truth, is an incredibly powerful tool for industries who are highly regulated and need to certify that something indeed happened at a moment in time, and that part is indeed from the person it's intended to be from. Walmart, a great case. Walmart, the world's largest retailer. When a company of this size starts using blockchain technology, it really says something. In 2016, Walmart conducted 2 pilot projects related to food provenance. So again, like the fish example with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, Walmart had experienced financial loss related to food contaminations, food supply chain problems, and the inability to pinpoint the source of a problem is incredibly costly. So that was the problem to be solved. Reduce the amount of time it takes to source a contamination. In 2006, there was a spinach E. coli outbreak, and it took weeks to source the problem, which ultimately was traced to a single batch from a single supplier, and it was 1 day's output. But it cost the food industry an enormous amount because people lost faith in eating any kind of spinach because they didn't know which spinach was bad and which spinach wasn't bad. All of the bagged salads went off the shelf. All of the spinach products were thrown out, and it was incredibly costly from a waste perspective. So that was the business problem to be solved. And Walmart says, okay, how can we leverage this technology to solve that waste problem, and what is it that we're actually trying to solve? What the technology enabled, 2 pilot projects were run, tracing pork in China and tracing mangoes in the United States. And through running pilot projects on a blockchain, they were able to trace the source of a food from the point of sale to the farm it came from in 2.2 seconds instead of what was previously 7 days. Our supply chains are largely paper-based. Sometimes they're in different languages. If we're buying produce from countries where English is not the language of record, it's not, the plant is inspected in another language, that's really difficult. That is a friction in our food supply chain. So Walmart's having implemented blockchain, you could scan a code, and again, it'll tell you in 2 seconds which farm that particular product is from. And for consumers, that raises trust. We're like, that product, it really is organic. It really does come from the organic farm. It raises every level of accountability along the supply chain. The fact that the regulators were there, they inspected the plant, the fact that the temperature of the shipping container was what it was supposed to be. Or we find that we know that there's a problem with this product, something is broken on that chain. And previously, the regulatory environment required that supply chains only had to know 2 things: where the goods came from and where they went to. And that just wasn't enough. That slowed down our ability to source problems and made the recall process a total nightmare. So the success of these pilots, both mangoes in the United States and pork in China, has led to Walmart running similar types of implementations for about 145 different products, which is exciting. So we'll see where that goes. I think that we're going to see more and more use cases in food provenance. Carrefour, a grocer in France, is also beginning to apply the technology in exactly the same way. Slockit, this is a great company. This organization is leveraging the technology and applying it with the Internet of Things. I'll tell you about Slockit. They were one of the first organizations to connect an inanimate object to the Ethereum blockchain. The Ethereum blockchain was a development which allowed other applications to be built on top of a blockchain, applications that could run their own calculations, created the foundation for what you might have heard of being smart contracts. So whereby things happen, A happens when certain conditions are met. So I'll give you an example. Slockit connected the Ethereum blockchain to a lock, like imagine a bicycle lock. And what they were able to do was have the lock open when certain conditions were met. What were the conditions? A micropayment of Ether was sent from an application to the lock's address, and the lock opens. And that enabled the idea for this sharing economy. So I could now rent a bicycle, I could rent a washing machine, I could rent a microwave, I could rent energy or buy energy from the charging stations. There are 6,000 charging stations in Germany that cars can now pull up to, and through smart contract applications, I can send my micropayment to that charging station, it charges my car, and off I go. So it just creates this level of efficiency that has not been possible before. And this application is relevant to organizations like Airbnb. We won't have key drops in the future. We'll simply be sending certain payments to access services and products using sensors and Internet of Things technology. So an interesting case, Slockit, has anyone ever heard of the DAO? The DAO hack, it was a very huge hack. The DAO was created by Slockit. And it was one of the first applications that was written on top of the Ethereum blockchain. So Ethereum is secure, just like the Bitcoin blockchain. The applications written on top have to be secure, and that's one of the challenges for the industry. Those applications can be compromised. If there's a weakness in the code, there can be hacks, and there have been hacks. And so that's the challenge of the blockchain community, is to code these smart contracts so that they're rock solid and they're not subject to compromise. One of the first examples of an Ethereum-based smart contract was the DAO, the Decentralized Autonomous Organization. It's really like a mutual fund where people sent the DAO some ether, some money, some cryptocurrency, in the hope that the DAO would generate profits by making investments in other types of technologies. Well, the DAO was hacked, and it caused a tremendous amount of chaos for the Ethereum community. The money was returned because the Ethereum community decided to do a reversal, very controversial move. But the company behind the DAO didn't go away. It learned from its mistakes, and it regrouped, and it took one of the most painful and public failures and humiliations and learned that they have to regroup and build better smart contracts, and build smart contracts that have contingencies in them, that account for human error, that account for problems, that leave some room for emergencies. So an early failure will have future benefits. A lot of this technology is still very experimental, and Slockit is not going away anytime soon. They're rebuilding and carrying on, and they're very committed to building a sharing economy. And finally, this is my last slide. I want to leave you with a possibility of where this technology can go that will actually benefit the planet. And imagine a time when we are able to be rewarded for making good environmental choices, and have a system whereby if I buy an eco-friendly product, I'm given a reward, an incentive for doing that. And I can spend that reward on things like public transit, but I can't spend my eco-friendly reward on putting gas in my car. And this is what we call the token economy, and incentivizing behavior, because all human behavior is incentive-driven. So if we want to reduce our carbon footprint, we have to have the economic incentives to do that. The Paris Agreement has been unsuccessful because the United States economic incentives are entirely misaligned. Trump's pulling out. There's no incentive structure that is going to save the planet right now. We're hoping that organizations who are leveraging blockchain technology are going to create incentivized economies where people make meaningful environmental choices, and where governments can incentivize its citizens to take public transit, where we can all work together in a new economy to to change our behavior. So we're seeing these developed, but this is just another example of an asset class that is non-traditional. It's not a financial asset, it's an environmental asset. So we'll see how this evolves in the course of blockchain's transformation. Now, how long do we have for questions? Oh. Maybe I should have slowed down. Thank you. Thank you for your attention, everybody. Excellent question. Because of the energy inefficiencies of permissionless blockchains like Bitcoin, there's an argument to say they're so energy inefficient, this is an environmental disaster, and it's true. The community recognizes that it has an energy problem on its hands, and it has to acknowledge that and find different solutions. Those who are Bitcoin maximalists and say, well, if you look at all the energy wasted in the current financial system and the shipping and the moving things back and forth and the building lights that are left on and how much energy waste is specific to existing asset transfer models, Bitcoin's probably less. That's their argument. There are a number of mining groups who are seeking to locate in areas where they cannot sell the energy that they generate, like Iceland. Northern Quebec is simply opening its source. We've got more energy than we can ship or store, so we might as well create a digital economy out of this resource. So where energy is cheap and plentiful, that is where the community is locating. On the other hand, the community recognizes that this is a problem that is not sustainable. So Ethereum, the Ethereum blockchain on which other applications can be written, is moving its consensus mechanism away from energy-intensive mining to a process called proof of stake. The energy consumption, the energy usage for validation, that consensus mechanism is called proof of work, where all those miners around the world are working and consuming energy to validate the blocks. That's called proof of work. Everyone's working really hard to solve that cryptographic problem. Proof of stake is a consensus mechanism which aims to validate transactions by other means, by all of the validators pledging a stake, skin in the game, some form of capital, whereby if they choose to manipulate the network or act maliciously, then they forfeit their stake, and the stake needs to be enough of a disincentive that everyone plays honorably and validates the network honorably. So that's what proof of stake is all about. And Ethereum is transitioning now from a proof of work consensus mechanism to a proof of stake consensus mechanism, which should be rolled out by late 2018 and into 2019, because the Ethereum community recognizes that energy question is totally unsustainable in a way that perhaps the Bitcoin maximalists don't see that. But perhaps there will be innovations that allow the Bitcoin blockchain to be validated in a way that uses less energy. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, it's a great question. It's a problem to be solved, and the community is definitely working on it. You're welcome. Yeah. The miners get paid. So here's what happens. Let's say I correctly validate the block. I get the winning nonce. I have the privilege of forming a new block, and the very first transaction of that new block is a payment from the protocol to my address. So it's built into the network that whichever entity validated the previous block is the first transaction of the new block. So it's built right into the software. Yeah. Minting new Bitcoins, but to whom it goes is predetermined. It's pre-coded into the protocol. Whichever person validates the block is the same address to which the reward is sent upon the formation of the new block. Yeah. Excellent question. Applications for enterprise are typically on private blockchains, which do not have the energy problems of a permissionless global blockchain like Bitcoin. So they're working with organizations like IBM. The Walmart example, they were working on IBM's Hyperledger blockchain, where the validators are only those participants who need to be participating in a given supply chain. So the network is much smaller, the energy consumption is almost inconsequential, but they're still grappling with how do you create a secure network, maintain everyone's honorable participation. Where organizations are leveraging public blockchains and private blockchains, like the case of the business licensing, public blockchains like Bitcoin were being used, and private blockchains. And so then you have this issue of interoperability. You need a layer so that the transactions taking place in Bitcoin are speaking to the transactions taking place on a private blockchain, and they're speaking to another application. So the interoperability question needs to be addressed as well. But for the most part, I see organizations using private blockchains, which are not requiring that massive global energy consuming infrastructure. And I saw that you had a point. Oh, yes. Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry, Sydney. Thank you. I'll repeat that question going forward.
Maybe building on that, actually, as similar functions in Walmart or other providers like blockchain, to use like an
I think interoperability, sorry, let me repeat the question. Is interoperability a solution to connecting disparate blockchains? And how far away are we from having interoperability be a meaningful plan? We are in the cradle stages. That's a great question. Cosmos, Aeon is not yet built. Cosmos is almost completely built. That's another interoperable blockchain. And so everything is still in development. But because we know that the need for interoperability is so high, it's just a different form of connectivity. Please. Excellent question. How does a current small business engage with blockchain? Well, I would recommend the first thing a small business should do is to become informed. Read as much as possible about what's taking place within your industry, around the world, get up to speed on other small businesses that might have experimented. I don't see it at the small business level just yet, unless your point of sale system is willing to accept cryptocurrencies. I think that's the first small business application is point of sale systems. There's a shortage of blockchain developers in the world, and they're focusing really on larger enterprise applications. Will probably be a little bit more challenging for the small business whose budget is smaller to be able to work with an industry of developers who are incredibly in demand. So I think it would be challenging for the small business owner right now to run an application or to code out a proof of concept. I think that would be really challenging. But I think point of sale, accepting cryptocurrencies, that's probably the low-hanging fruit for the small business owner. A small business can still, sorry, let me repeat the question. Is this, right. Okay, does scale equate to security? So for the small business application. I think security of public blockchains is certainly determined by the size of the network and the number of nodes. That security is, you know, it would be easier to hack 5 nodes than it would. Yeah, but typically I think for enterprise we're looking at private blockchains anyway, and so everyone has to agree to be part of a private organization to play nice and to validate for in the best interests of the group. I think if a small business were implementing a blockchain, you wanted security, then you would want to work with a large community of lots of validators, lots of nodes. How does the volatility of cryptocurrencies affect enterprise? Great question. And when buying, so we'll give you the example of Overstock, a retailer in the United States, an online retailer who chose to accept dozens of different cryptocurrencies as a payment mechanism for its products. Overstock made the decision to retain 50% of the cryptocurrency in stores and not convert it back to fiat currency. That was a decision that looked great in December when cryptocurrency markets were at all-time highs, and their stock price quadrupled as a result of their hoarding digital assets as a store of value. So that worked out really well for Overstock, but their stock price has since come down as the value of cryptocurrencies on the market have come down. Another thing that happens, organizations raise funds in cryptocurrency for their, through initial coin offerings. The decision then they have to make is, how much do I sell it all? Do I convert it back into fiat currency in order to lock in? And that's a decision that only organizations can make. Some who sold their cryptocurrency funds raised and converted it back to fiat in early 2017 were disappointed that they were not able to ride the wave of appreciation. But we all can't foresee the future of cryptocurrency prices. And so it's a decision that is based on the forecast of where do we think this market is going. But yeah, we ultimately have to convert. You could convert on the spot. You could accept crypto as a payment mechanism and then just dump it right away and choose to have no current cryptocurrency exposure. At the back. So if I understand your question, are we researching the ways in which power generation is sustaining the mining community? Yeah, we are not looking at that as a case example at the Institute. Our research is largely driven to meet the needs of our member community, who are largely government and enterprise. And so we have 45 members, 3 levels of Canadian government. We're supported by the federal government, the province of Ontario, and the City of Toronto is our municipal government supporter. We're also supported by the University Health Network in Toronto, a 5-hospital large conglomerate, and the Ministry of Health in Ontario is a separate provincial agency. And so we're trying to produce research, we are producing research that is very much specific to meet the strategic planning goals of our members. Same thing for industry. If a new member joins our organization and they're in an industry that we're not currently conducting research, we'll try to put a specific project together that will help them transition their business to plan for the next, for the foreseeable future. How do I feel about the government's accepting crypto? Well, it's happening. The state of Arizona is accepting cryptocurrencies for the payment of municipal services for taxes. The city of Toronto is thinking about accepting cryptocurrency to pay things like fines and other municipal penalties because I think they see the trend taking place around the world. In Switzerland, the canton, Zug canton, is doing much the same thing. And so this is the trend that we're seeing unfold. So I think it's perhaps wise to experiment and to test the waters. I would hate to see governments do opposite and absolutely ban the use of cryptocurrencies, because there are a lot of opportunities that the technology could create, and so I think it would be a good thing to experiment. Why not? Yeah.
Yeah, if I went to a shoebox and I found a box, bunch of $100 bills from 1960, I can go spend it. If 50 years from now, want to compute, what have you, Russia or Germany is developing a great computer, they go into cryptocurrency, they wipe out the whole system.
Okay, so the question is, can quantum computing wipe out the whole system?
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent question, and yes, it's coming. Quantum computing is not only going to wipe out cryptocurrency, but it's going to wipe out every other database that's being used today. The sentiment is that the cryptocurrency community is going to be better prepared for the quantum threat than traditional databases. Quantum is about 7 to 10 years away from that being a relevant, meaningful emergency. And there are existing quantum patches that can be forked onto blockchain protocols to make them quantum proof. Some blockchains today are purportedly quantum proof, one of which is called IOTA. It's the Internet of Things application, and it has a totally different consensus mechanism that is energy efficient and very interesting, controversial. But yeah, quantum computing is a serious threat to all of our systems, both blockchains and non-blockchains. So.
Wipe out the whole, I don't know how many dollar bills there are in circulation. But with blockchain, you could have, what is it, 80 million or something like that. Let's say everything was out there, everybody was using it as a currency, and then wiped it out.
I don't think we'll have that type of sudden situation. I think one of the projects we produced at the BRI is how to build quantum-proof blockchains. And it was led by a great group out of the University of Waterloo in the region. And we know that we can put quantum patches on today. The problem with quantum patches today is that they're incredibly slow. So the quantum patches are going to be there. I don't see a total dismantling of blockchains as a result, but the community has to prepare for the eventuality that quantum patches need to be, you either need to build a quantum-proof blockchain from scratch, or you have to patch the blockchain to be quantum-proof. And they're working on making those quantum patches efficient so that they're not going to bog down the system. Take another one, yeah? I think if we learn anything from derivatives, it's the global financial crisis of 2008. We seem to keep wanting derivatives. So human nature will weave its way into this technology just as it's a fundamental part of our current financial system. Sorry, and I didn't repeat the question for Sydney, and that was whether derivative products had a future in blockchain technology. And so yes, my answer is yes, because people keep wanting derivative products, and they want to be able to borrow against their crypto, and they want to be able to leverage as much as they can, because that is human nature. So I do see blockchain being very effective in making derivative products better and less risky. Certainly those derivative products that are backed by real estate transactions take days to settle. 3 days where you have a trust agreement and there's not a settlement and you've got exposure for a number of days. If we can have derivative products that are settled and secured by blockchain and real-time architecture, that might make for better derivative products. But no, derivatives they're going to come and be a part of this ecosystem, and they're here. Okay, so your question is, the Bitcoin mining community, as you see it, is very centralized because the majority of Bitcoin miners have been concentrated in China, the United States, and Germany. And do I see it becoming more decentralized? More centralized. No, I don't. I think the community is the community. And I talk about the community. All the stakeholders involved recognize the dangers of centralization, and they are actively trying to safeguard against centralization of cryptocurrencies because of the risks inherent with. Decentralization has always been the objective, and I think the community is going to fight very hard to keep decentralization at the core of a functioning peer-to-peer electronic cash system. It must be decentralized in order to be trusted, and I think that's the fear on people's minds, or the worry is that there will be a 51% takeover of the network. That's the most unsettling concept out there. But so far it's fairly geographically dispersed. I actually see it becoming more geographically dispersed as more participants all around the world become participants in the network in the developing world. So I'm hopeful that we'll see decentralization sustained and maintained as a core value of a peer-to-peer electronic system. Ooh. Oh, I'm not a quantum expert. I can't for a million years pretend that I were a quantum expert. But what I understand of quantum computing is that the computing speed, the processing power of quantum computers is so fast that it enables an object to be in two places simultaneously, and therefore able to undermine basic structures of systems. So it's that speed and ability. It's incredible technology, and certainly not my area of expertise, but it's incredible. The founder, one of the co-founders of BlackBerry, Mike Lazaridis, came up to Don Tapscott, my boss, at his book launch in 2016, and Mike said to Don, he said, "Hey Don, my quantum computers are going to bust up your blockchains." And yeah, there's the Waterloo Toronto corridor is very much a center of excellence, global excellence in quantum computing. We perhaps need a center of excellence for responsible quantum computing, where we're not undermining the entire planet's digital infrastructure. So I wish I knew more. I'm happy to take questions. I'm mindful of everyone else's time, so I'm happy to take questions. Okay, so for our friends in Cape Breton, the question is, will there be some consolidation of currencies as a sort of global unified payment mechanism, moving from US dollar or managing the fact that the US dollar is the global standard right now for international trade? What will be the new reserve currency to replace the US dollar? And we obviously need one, as the gentleman's comment. It could very well be a digital currency. I'm not going to say that it will be Bitcoin. Bitcoin has the most strength, having been around for 9 years, the strongest community all around the world. It could very well be a standard, a digital gold, against which assets are valued. Our notion of money is led by our ideas of value. And if people decide that Bitcoin is valuable, then they're going to change their attitudes about it. And so it's an evolution. We will see whether or not a currency like Bitcoin is able to come into mainstream consciousness and be the reliable global currency. Once upon a time, it wasn't the US dollar. It was the British pound, gold. And so we do see throughout history our notions of what that standard is change. And so we'll probably see a digital standard being a universal and efficient standard to go by. Be interesting. Yeah. Good question. Okay, so your first question is, what happens after the last Bitcoin has been minted? What will sustain the incentive mechanism of the network? And quite simply, that will happen in 2140. And transaction fees will have to take over as a way to sustain the validation of Bitcoin blocks. There will have to be some incentive mechanism in its place to replace the release of new Bitcoin into the system. That's how the community views it, that incentives are needed in some form. But as we move closer to the last Bitcoin being minted, the reward splits and splits and splits and splits over time. And the premise is that with the fixed supply of Bitcoin, the community foresees the value of that Bitcoin going up over time, and therefore even the smallest amount of Bitcoin as a reward will be quite meaningful to sustain the network. But that's the premise behind it. And then your second question is, when applications run on top of a transactional platform like Ethereum, are they, would you repeat that? Right. It depends on the how are the rewards given in other applications? What's the currency? Or what's the mechanism? Yeah, so whichever platform a given application is running on, typically, let's say Ethereum, then the reward structure of Ethereum is the digital unit called Ether. So Ether is generated when Ethereum blocks are validated, and that's the mechanism. Now, applications that run on top of Ethereum have different tokenized economies, where to use the system you have to spend Ether. To build your application on Ethereum, you have to spend Ether. But an application can be designed to pay out a token of its own, not necessarily Ether, but a token of its own kind. I can't. Can I define the Hive blockchain? No, I'm sorry. It's not my area of expertise. Sorry about that, Kate Breton. Yes. I will get back to you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you very much. Thanks.
So I realize I'm between you and a rainy Friday in Halifax, so I want to again thank Hilary for a tremendous time. I expected to get one or two aha moments out of today, and I'm sort of overloaded with ahas at the moment. So thank you for that. I also want to thank Capgemini for being wonderful partners of ours and helping put this all together, driving this for us. If you want to reach out to Capgemini, again, their contact information will be on our presentations. RPA experts here as well for that. So again, thank you very much for coming. Lessons learned for NSBI's: book a bigger room next time. See if we can get the weather to cooperate. And again, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great
Awesome.
job.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
I think I kind of got a perfect level for the audience.
Good, good.
Kind of went through the basics, but teased with some more complicated stuff.
Good. Hope so.